You're listening to the PooleProof Wisdom Podcast, where we bring our authentic selves, refuse to raise grown folks, and share wisdom you can use. With your host, Charles K. Poole.
Good morning, and welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is someone I'm very excited to talk about and talk with. Jane Davis is the kind of creative spark who helps others realize the impossible. We met and worked together on more projects than I can even count when we were both based in St. Louis many years ago working for AnheuserBusch. Her infectious energy, keen insights, and tremendous drive earned my trust and respect, and so it is with all her many clients to this day. Now a director and producer based in Atlanta, Jane is owner of HypeGirl Creative, a full-service production house that produces video content. The company collaborates with an extensive network of creative talent across the country and curates a custom team for each project the company takes on, thereby helping customers meet their goals and exceed even their own expectations. Jane considers her work professional storytelling and focuses on helping bringing a brand story to life in an engaging and impactful way. And for more than 20 years of living her passion working in the production industry, she's aligned her creative instincts with an astute business acumen that helps her remain a successful business owner to this day. As a woman who owns and operates a business, Jane is one of more than 11.6 million women who own businesses in the United States, according to the National Association of Women Business Owners, 5.4 million of which are majority owned by women of color. A self-described army brat of Korean heritage, Jane says that the opportunity her experiences have provided her to travel and be exposed to many cultures still influence her today. In fact, from the moment she first picked up her family's camcorder as a kid, she says, she was immediately obsessed with creating videos and telling stories through the lens of a camera. Prior to forming HypeGirl Creative, Jane held a variety of roles supporting production and post-production efforts for major brands. Throughout her creative career, brand-driven storytelling became her specialty, working on commercials, corporate communications, and integrated content across a variety of industries for clients that include AnheuserBusch, Pizza Hut, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Undeniably Dairy, Citibank, and a number of other diverse companies. To quote her approach to her work, Jane says, quote, "From a rough outline to the final deliverable, I'm dedicated to every step of the process. I partner with artists and brands to build on existing ideas, create original concepts, or get where I fit in and function as the production guru to an already well-oiled machine." Well said, Jane, well said. Since she works across multiple industries and categories, it's always been important to her to be, quote, "a sponge and absorb as much information as possible." Jane frequently says that one of the best parts about her work is that she gets to learn just enough to be dangerous, and therefore, in a pinch, she says that she can honestly think that she could brew beer, make artisan mozzarella cheese, conduct a mortgage closing, and even deliver a baby. Remember, she did say that that would be in a pinch. Now, I tend to believe she could do any of these things and more. As a creative who also operates a business, she's had to learn a lot about the business side of her work on the fly and has done so and remains standing because she is a quick study and learns from everyone with whom she engages about everything that she can. In her collaborations with premier brands, agencies, and production companies, she has worked with countless talented and professional individuals from whom she's learned a great deal in terms of how to professionally grow and whom she has come to admire. And today, we're going to discuss how, with HypeGirl, Jane has been able to keep the importance of having a creative community of creators and storytellers as the foundation of her business model, while also seeking to evolve and grow as a business. It's a compelling story, and I'm so looking forward to learning more about her journey so far and why she believes so fervently that she cannot do what she does without collaborating with amazing teams and individuals? We're about to find out. Hey, Jane, good morning and welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And how long has it been since you and I have probably seen each other? I don't even know.
You know what? It was in Vegas
That would
in
be,
2019, right?
was it that recent?
I think for your
For the birthday,
birthday.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
lost.
that was such a fun trip and such a great group. It was, I mean, that's why I remember it was like, such an unforgettable time. And we did Vegas right.
Well,
Vegas is a little wonky. You never know. You gotta, pace yourself. But when we celebrated your birthday, we did it right. That was the
that's
way to do it. I mean,
wonderful.
of course, it's Charles Poole.
Well, I don't know. The thing is that when we went there, and now that you mention the date, it all comes back to me because I normally need a reference point before I can remember things these days. I'm like, when was that? But thanks for that.
Hey,
But
before COVID is
oh
a
my
big reference
gosh,
point
yeah,
always now,
yeah,
right?
BC has entirely different meaning now. But yeah, when we went to Vegas to do that, we did it like grown folks. We were not newbies, so that made all the difference in the world.
That's
So,
right.
the
That's
thing
right.
that I wanted to talk with you about today is about the fact that you are this wonderful, creative business owner who is a woman. And I don't see that necessarily in terms of there being any type of negative connotation to it because you've never seen it that way. But I wanted to go back a little bit. When we initially met, I was working with Anheuser-Busch, you were working with Anheuser-Busch, and we were able to find the path to getting to work together because we started in the area that I was working in, doing a lot of creative events and activities that necessarily needed to be recorded and shared. And I needed a creative partner who could help bring to fruition those ideas. And you and I met and we worked together. And even though they had other people, anytime I had anything after that, I was like, I know I'd prefer to work with Jay. So that's how that came into being. But I want you to talk to me about your path to getting involved in creative endeavors. And then from there, a little bit about how once you decided that this was your life's work, you decided
Mhm.
that it wasn't just going to be something that you did for other people, but would make a business out of.
Well, as I knew early on what I wanted to do. And it was just simply finding, there's always that, ad- that journey you take of like, what's your passion? And some people have passions and it's not necessarily a career.
Hmm.
And so for me, I was pretty lucky, just like having a childhood where my mom was, one of those people that she wanted me and my brother to try everything, like sports, like try all the sports, see what you like. And so even just like always encouraging us that we could do whatever we wanted to. And so, having an older brother, always wanting to like play, like, played with GI Joes over Barbies. And so I had more guy friends than girlfriends when I was a kid, just because I hung out with my brother's friends. And then as I started to get older, it's like the combination of me picking up that first camcorder and I started shooting like videos when my friends and I would hang out and we, have little parties. And then I found a way, like it got to the point where I was like, wait a minute, I just have all this footage on this VHS tape. What's it, just playing it long all the way through of just like us having a pool party or somebody's birthday party. It wasn't as interesting. So I learned how to connect it to the VCR and I learned to edit a montage of my friends and I hanging out. And then I would play it for them. And so I think it just like in my childhood, I was always surrounded by really good storytellers and just kind of observed. So I think, being surrounded by storytellers and being surrounded by people that were observers,
Hmm.
and you find that you're connected to those people and what you like about them. And that's one of the things about you. Like I knew right away early on meeting you, you're an observer,
Hmm.
and that just makes conversations more interesting. And so I took that and just kind of when it got to like, college and like what you wanted to do, it was just a matter of how do I do what I really enjoy doing and make money doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just did the path of, going to college, had a communications major, and you start learning right away in that industry. Of course, this was a long time ago, that even in my classes, in a production classes, I would be one of two girls in a big classroom of just all guys. And I think it's just all the things you learn in your childhood where, it wasn't intimidating to me because at the end of the day, I was a shy kid growing up, like really shy. And my mom did what she could to, as a friend of mine who's a child psychologist said, she gave me survival skills. I think that between that combination and then being in a classroom with all guys, it wasn't intimidating because at that point I was kind of like, I accept this challenge.
I got you.
Because why not? Like why not be the one that's a little different? Like in a room full of guys, you've got two girls and the other girl's name was Charisse, and her and I, we knew like, hey, this is going to be how it is. And I think that from that point, it's like you accept that challenge, but you got to fully accept that challenge.
Right.
So I think that from my mentality, I wanted to, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to be working with men, I'm not going to give it like that overwhelming thought to where it's going to intimidate me. I'm just going to do whatever I can to learn everything I can so that when I go into a production, it's very clear from the beginning, I know what I'm doing.
Gotcha.
And I think that men or women, no matter what, you're going to universally respect someone that has confidence in everyone's ability and knows how to get the information that we need to get. And, it's like all the little things where it's like learning the production equipment, learning what kind of cameras, all the technical things. I remember at a young age when I would be in a room with a new group of crew members that were all men. And so for me, it's important for them to know that, hey, I get it. There's a, the name producer sometimes is a full realm of, sometimes you get a good producer, sometimes you just get somebody that they just give them that label. So, in defense of those crew members, there's a reason those stereotypes exist.
Right.
So for me, it's just always important that right off the bat, we talk about gear. We talk about those important things that make a production run really well. And that's all it is. It's just letting them know that, hey, and it doesn't need to be like ego driven. It's just, you can show your confidence by just setting the tone of how the production is going to be run. And so that's kind of how I have just evolved. And, listen, I've been on bad video productions where the director is a total asshole. And so you learn and watch, like, that's how I don't want to be.
Right.
Or you watch somebody that is really good at what they do. And you're like, that's how I want to be. Like, that's the kind of person I want to be on set. And those are all things at a young age. I just, absorbed information. And that's kind of how I've carried my career. And, of course, I've had a lot of great support along the way.
Let's talk a little bit about that confidence, because as a child coming up, being surrounded by great storytellers is one thing, because you can look at them and say, wow, they tell great stories. But when do you make the transition where, aside from loving recording things, videoing, these types of, things that you're coming across, that you have this realization that says, you know what, I'm really good at this? When did that happen for you?
I think that it happened. I honestly think like later on when I was, even after college, when I started to, like college and before college, you're just learning. You're just trying to learn. And you don't really even know like what it is that makes you special at what you do or makes you unique at what you do until you're in it. And so I think for me, like, one of the things that I probably, early on, just like I didn't have a chance early on to be the person that would necessarily be in control of the edits, because early on in the production industry, I was like a PA or a production coordinator and learning all the other things that I thought I should know if I'm going to somehow run a crew and run a production. So that all happened early on. And then I think for me, it wasn't until I really started doing stuff for Anheuser-Busch, to be totally honest, because everything else up until that point was just running productions and then helping other director or producers finish and edit. So I didn't really have much control of the storytelling aspect, but I always knew that I'm doing all of this to get to that. And that's the thing, is I always knew I wanted to do that. I don't think I knew if I was good or not until I started to do things for Anheuser-Busch, where it was, before it had the sexy name branded content.
Right.
We did a lot of stuff, and it was a lot of times it was just wholesaler stories, beer driven, marketing driven. And I do think, Charles, that you and I have never, we're having this conversation for the first time. I think that it was you.
Really?
Think about when we started doing stuff in your department. That was when we were doing a lot of the things like the fundraising events that Anheuser-Busch would sponsor.
Right. Cause
And so the
marketing.
stories for me, it was turned slightly from more of the marketing aspect and glorious montages that, hey, even my montages have a story to them.
Right.
But the stories of people, the first real opportunity I had with that was working for your department. And that was, the Holly Rod Foundation. There was a art foundation in Miami
Right.
with Russell Simmons. And I think you had Michael on your podcast. I remembered him from that. And then just a few of those where it was a little deeper. It was more than just a beer company that's marketing great products. It was the stories of the support that Anheuser-Busch was giving these foundations and learning what those foundations were about and the importance of it. And so then it's like, for me, I had to translate, how can I show really the importance of this and give people that feeling of, this is important. This means something. Look at what we're doing, and that to me, I think that was like my first real opportunity to create those kinds of stories. And then of course, when I show you for approval and then you would have the responses that you would have, it was like the first time I really genuinely got like, oh, like that makes me feel good, that it made you feel good, and everybody else that saw it. Obviously, that was something that I really, really enjoyed. And man, I wanted to do more of that kind of storytelling.
Well, that's a surprise to me. And for listeners, that is not a paid endorsement.
I know.
I did not pay Jane to say that about me. I did not know it was happening, I swear. But I am very, very happy to hear that. But I do want to go back a little bit further because, see, for me, this is what I know. Long before you were in school, long before you were even in the professional realm of actually doing these things, there was some point where little Jane, 8 years old, 9 years old, somehow realized with all of those interests that she had for storytelling, for videotaping, and all these types of things, that there was something about it that not only made you happy, but compelled you to keep doing it. Now, I'll illustrate that in a personal way. Even though I ended up doing something completely different than what I'd spent all of my childhood preparing for. I was a science nerd. I was going to be a doctor, and literally went through that process up until the time that I was in my third year of college, about to take the MCAT to gain admission to medical school, when I said, I don't want to do this. But everything before then was, you're going to be a doctor. This is what it takes to do it. And I'm still a science nerd, but it's not my passion. But for you, early on, that switch was flipped. You knew what your passion was. As much as I lay claim to doing what I love for a profession for a very long time now, you've known what your first love is professionally longer than I ever have. And it's that thing that I'm trying to get to, is that when you were that little Jane, you know, kid who was just playing and doing things, do you even know what that impetus was that helped you flip that switch that let you know that someday when I grow up, I'm going to be doing this?
I so ever since I was a kid, I had like a few passions of just being a person that I loved music. I loved movies. I mean, my parents were pretty, they weren't overly strict about like what kind of movie we could watch. I mean, they tried, but I think at the same time, my parents were really strict with so many things.
Okay.
My brother and I, just like growing up, that I think there were some things they would just give. And
Right.
so like on the weekends, my brother and I, we would watch those old school like kung fu master movies
Hmm.
like on USA.
Yeah.
And then I was like the Star Wars, just those kinds of big movies that we all grew up on. I loved the movies and
Right.
I loved music. And so I think for me, I just always loved the little glimpses, because we didn't have social media, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have
Right.
all that stuff to know the behind the scenes. But whenever we would watch something where you get a glimpse of behind the scenes of what it took to create that,
Hmm.
that to me was like this. I was so interested
Hmm.
in that, because you've got this product that looks amazing, but something we all know in production, the behind the scenes production stuff is not that sexy. It's not.
Right. Right.
I mean, we all make it look cool, and
Mm.
it is a very cool thing to be a part of.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, it is not that sexy. But I loved it. And I was always interested in those behind the scene moments. And then I think that when I got to that point of the old school camcorder that,
Mm.
the tape VHS
Oh
popped
yeah.
up off the side, for me, that was kind of like, ooh, look at me. I've got a
Right.
camcorder.
Uh-huh.
Not that I really tried to like make movies as a
Right.
kid, but at the same time, it was like a way for me to channel what I thought was so cool as a
Hmm.
kid. And then I
Hmm.
think that just had that snowball effect
Hmm.
ultimately.
I want to posit something here, and then we're going to get back to the whole issue about confidence again. But, I believe that in all of us, there are things that we don't know about ourselves that are revealed to us because we are so busy living our lives as we live it. We're not paying attention. It seems to me, and I'm just going to, spitball this, but the understanding that you knew what your passion was from a young age seems very much present based on the story that you've shared. You didn't know that's what you were necessarily going to be doing. You just knew that you loved it. But somewhere along the line, you made this decision that you didn't just want to love it, but you wanted to take what you were able to do and turn into something tangible that you knew everything about, hence the going to the school and studying and this type of thing. And then when you get to the point when you're actually in that professional realm, I don't even think you know this now, but your confidence is born of that early on understanding that the medium and the opportunities it provided you to reflect what you saw going on in the world around you was literally all the confidence that you really ever need. The other elements, obviously, that are associated with who you are and the world in which we live, they didn't come into play because you had that spark early on that says, this is what I love, this is what I'm going to learn to do better, and you did it. Is that fair in terms of
Yeah, I
identifying it?
do.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think about it like in so many ways, like how much just doing what I do
Mm-hmm.
has helped me in so many ways too, because I mentioned earlier when I was a kid, I was like incredibly shy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was the kid when my mom and dad will tell this story that when I was in kindergarten that they had Santa Claus. It was Christmas time. They had Santa Claus there and they invited parents and all the kids lined up to go sit on Santa's lap, take a picture. And my parents were there and they're looking in the line and they don't see me. And so my mom is like, "Where's Jane? Where's Jane?" And then she's looking around and I'm like in the back corner sitting by myself. And so now, of course, anybody that knows me, they're like, "What?
Right.
You were shy as a kid?" And my mom was like immediately alarmed, like,
Mm-hmm.
"What? Like she's not like this at home. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
not this shy at home."
Mm-hmm.
And so she, went and got me, like, "Come on," and encouraged me to get in line and go take a picture with Santa. And then afterwards, she spoke to teachers, and my teacher said, "Jane, like, she hardly speaks in class. Like, she doesn't talk to anybody. She is very shy." And so my mom was concerned and just said, "Look, she's not like this in school. Can I come into?" So she had this whole plan worked out with the teacher that she was going to come to class like twice a week, volunteer as a tutor,
Ah.
work with kids.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't in her group, and we would but just having her there
Right.
helped me get confidence. And so, of course, like when you say like there are things that you don't even know about yourself
Mm-hmm.
until way later on,
Right.
I always, of course, appreciated my mom for doing that. And then my mom taught me things like when you're walking, like I feel like she had a lot to do with instilling
Mm-hmm.
things like when you're walking, don't walk with your head down. Walk like you have a place to go.
Right.
Like you walk like you know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all those little things that I would just like keep in the back of my mind, like remember that. And so just literally just like 4 years ago, I remember talking to that friend who's a child psychologist, and she had said like, "You're very reserved. Like as an adult, you're reserved when you meet some people. Like you can have conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but as a person, I can tell you're very reserved in the information you give out about yourself to people."
Mm-hmm.
And so she just kind of said, like, when you grew up, were you an introvert or like an introvert extrovert? And so I told her that story. And she said, this is what I learned 4 years ago, the term. She said, "Your mom taught you survival skills."
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that to me, that was like, it all came together. And then I think that for me, just even in working in the production industry, if this is what I'm going to do, like, my favorite type of storytelling are those authentic stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that when you're revealing someone else's story, it's easier when you can yourself make an authentic connection with them.
Exactly.
And so so in a way, I always think of production being my superpower. It's provided me that superpower of, I don't just talk to people. Like I'm not that person. Like I'm not going to just talk to strangers, but if I have a purpose, if there's a reason for me to talk to them and a reason for me to learn things about them, because they're going to be revealing things about what they do or what they think about in life that is their passion and drives them, then I want to be authentic back to them, because I know because I am reserved, where I'm not just going to talk about I don't enjoy talking about myself all the time like that. So I know that it's not easy. And if I'm going to get that from them on camera, then I need to have a genuine connection with them and make them feel like I am listening. And I think ultimately all those things, just the puzzle pieces came together. But, I always say, like, in real life, I don't know if I would ever talk to them, but because of what I do get to talk to them. And I learn from these stories. Like there's interviews I've done so many years ago that I still think about some of the wisdom that comes from the people that I interview. So it's been all around, as much as I love what I do, it's a very fulfilling to me because I get to be a part of things that I don't think I ever would be, or go to places I never thought I would be at if it wasn't for what I did within production, in the production world.
I think that's the best answer I've heard to describe. Well,
Thank you, Charles.
No, seriously, it's an interesting thing to me, because listening to you, I'm reflecting personally, which is of course what I do. A lot of people don't understand it, and I understand it now in the context of why you and I do get on so well. People meet me and they assume that I'm an extrovert, and I'm exactly the opposite. You know this, right? But when you have to turn it on in pursuit of what you're doing, it's there. It's like a tool, and you access it, and once you've used it, you put it away again until you need to use it again. And so listening to you describe that so perfectly, I'm like, girl, that is the best way of describing this that I've ever heard. I've never even thought of it in that context myself, but that's exactly it. You will always be an introvert. You never change from it. It's just that you become empowered in terms of understanding how to utilize it when appropriate versus when you need to access another skill set to accomplish an overall goal. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Wow, that is mind-blowing to me. That's perfect. You heard it here. Jane Davis.
It's a superpower.
Yeah, you just gave me a PooleProof wisdom moment. That's awesome. I
Listen, I'm done. That's it. I've done my job.
Yeah, well, no. We still got more time. But here's the thing I want to get into with that. Try that again. Specifically as it relates to your mom and the skills that she gave you, those survival skills. You had mentioned earlier on when I was asking about confidence, about the fact that you didn't have, I'm going to use the word hang-ups. And for anyone who that pisses off, that's the word I use. If you want to use another one, so be it. You didn't have any hang-ups going into the circumstances you found yourself where you were competing head-to-head with guys in an environment which was, terrifically man-heavy, right? That does go back to what you say your mom gave you. But even in the midst of knowing that you didn't have those types of considerations, I'm sure that people tried you from time to time, whether it was mansplaining or just feeling that there was a right and a privilege that was had because of gender. Even if you didn't have any big considerations where you walked in the door and thought, well, I need to make myself smaller so that they'll feel comfortable. How do you battle that? How do you face it in a way where you are still able to maintain your own personal sense of decorum? That's not what the world expects. Your own personal sense of value and ideology and creativity when everyone is trying to show you a place where they think you simply belong. How do you do that?
Honestly, I think that part of that is, and I don't mean this in just kind of like being just like, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. And of course, we've, being in the production industry for, not to age myself, but being in the production industry for over 20 years, I've seen where it was when I came in and where it is now. But, there definitely, it's awesome to see like a lot of young women. I've worked with so many young women here in Atlanta that are just getting started. And I'm genuinely excited for them because they get to see where now these big production crews, it's like 50-50. There's like women DPs, women gaffers, not just women makeup artists. I mean, there's men as makeup artists now. So, they get to grow up on this side of there's more diversity between men and women. And then I fully appreciate where it's come to, but I also was a part of when it wasn't like that, when I would be the only girl on set. And I know a lot of women that are older than me that even dealt with worse things that I dealt with. So I think that it's not something that's forgotten, but I just never, and maybe it was part of me trying to like give myself an internal pep talk, but I never wanted that to be the overshadowing thing. And I never let myself feel intimidated, even if I was a little intimidated, going into situations of working with a whole new crew that I've never worked with. And it was good training for me early on in my career because I didn't really have a choice. It was like, Jane, you're going to go here and this is the crew that you're working with. Now I have a choice. That's what you work for. You work for to have that choice. But back then I didn't have that choice. And so for me, I always knew going into it that, yes, I might have a DP that maybe doesn't want to take directions from a woman. I get it. But I just never let that be the overshadowing factor. And in my headspace, what I tried to focus on was, again, that superpower thing of my purpose. My purpose here is to come here to interview these people, make it look good, tell a good story. And while sometimes I've had those experiences where I've had to, have some good spoken tos with DPs back in the day. And those guys were a lot older than me too. So I think for me, it was not just that I was a woman, but also because I was young, and you got these older DPs that probably see me as, what's she going to know that I don't know?
Right.
Well, what they don't know is I'm the one that knows the content that we need to capture. So I definitely have had those collision moments. That's for maybe another time. But I think that if anything, it's just something that it really is true. It makes you stronger, and it makes you know that, you know what, I'm not always going to have to work with DPs that I don't know, that I've never worked with, but this is a good learning experience for me. And I always try to think like that. Even today, I go through things now in production where I'm like, why did I go through that? Like, what in the world, what lesson was there for me to learn to go through that mess? And, I'm a big believer in the influence that people, good and bad, can have in your life. And, when I was, right, like first few years in St. Louis, I worked as a, paid intern production assistant. And I remember a lot of when I would go on a production set, and I remember like my first Schnucks commercial that I worked on, and I was a PA, and it was just all men. There was a lady that was in charge of Crafty, and the director was a guy. And I remember the first time I saw two females walk in, and one was the executive producer and the other one was a producer. And it wasn't just that they were there, like they were there and they knew what needed to happen. And I was, as a production assistant, I'm working for the producer. And so for me, this was like the first time I had a female producer that I got to work for. And I just thought it was the coolest thing to watch them work. And it made me, for the first time, I thought I could totally do this just by me seeing another female on set in the capacity that, in the position that she was. And I just thought, yes, I can do this. And so it's those little encouragements that, I always remember. And then just like, even, the first time I worked with a female director, first time I worked at a young age, and it's like all those things build up. And then now I find myself in that position where I'm the veteran, and it's like I said, it's been really fun to see, the Atlanta production scene. Right. We all know, Atlanta's got a great production scene here, and the diversity that I've seen on set between genders and race that is so well represented here in Atlanta. It makes me super proud of the production industry that I get to be a part of. And at the same time, I find myself like in that, there's this like sense of responsibility that I didn't really think I had before until, being here and working with so many younger production women that are still trying to figure out some they want to be in production, but I don't know what exactly I want to do. And that's a big point in what I do in my productions is when I work with PAs, guys or girls, I always ask them, what do you want to do? Like, do you know in production what you want to do? And if a girl is like, I want a DP, then I want to kind of help her as a PA. I want her to kind of work with the camera team because I want her to learn the lingo and to see, is that what you want to do? If a girl is like, I want to be a director someday, or a guy is like, I want to tell stories. I want to be an editor. Those are all things that I want to learn because I want to help them get to that point, because I had a lot of great people that supported me throughout my career that have been great mentors that I still stay in touch with, that I still learn from. And so for me, that's such an important part, I think, to give people that confidence in what they want to do in life professionally.
That's a lot to take on. It's a responsibility. Excuse me.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility, but I want to get to that a little bit here too. So often when you represent a group that is considered not majority in whatever the capacity is, there's this sense that you bear on your shoulders this responsibility for being perfect for everyone else who you represent. So, you've got a few categories that you need to be looking at according to popular opinion. I believe that we are human first. And if we are happening to be individual things, I mean, I look in the mirror, there's no doubt who I am or where I come from. I know you feel exactly the same way. But I think that excellence is something that we should be doing in a way that appeals to anyone who may look like us or come from where we come from. But it should be something that actually does it in the broader sense as well. Because it's easy to categorize someone as being unique because of their individual characteristics. We've got nothing better to illustrate that than the recent Supreme Court hearings, where everybody was making such a big deal about the fact that, well, she's a great black judge. I'm like, she's great no matter what. She just happens to be this. So talk to me a little bit about that responsibility that some people do try to cast on you, that you are supposed to be this perfect representation of all of the categories of existence in which you reside.
I think that I think maybe that's the key is I definitely don't ever think of myself as perfect. I know if I still make mistakes. And then I think that it's all about the recovery. I think that it's so important as a leader in a production set. And I'm just using maybe I'm using a production set as like, life or whatever. I don't know, but
it is.
in production as a leader, I think there's people who say they want to be collaborative, like, oh, I love to collaborate with people. And then there are people who actually are collaborative.
Right.
And I think part of that collaborative energy is there's times where I'm going to make a mistake. And for me, being a leader, it shouldn't be about ego. I think there's a difference also between ego and confidence. I think the confidence is to be able to say, oh yeah, I wanted to do that, but that's not going to work. Let's do it the way we were talking about in our meeting or whatever. Let's try it that way. That was our backup. So I think that part is so important, because at the end of the day, if I think that somebody else, if they make a mistake, to me, if they recover and they say, and they own it and they're like, hey, this happened and here's what I think we should do to fix it, that goes such a long way for everybody. And so I think that part is so important. And then also I think maybe it's because I've worked with women that weren't collaborative, that weren't that. So I don't try to put that pressure on myself other than I'm just going to be Jane.
There you go.
That in the professional world, in the personal world, I'm just going to be who I am. Because at the end of the day, I'd like to joke that it's all about me, but it is. It's like, if I'm going to go do this at a random hop farm or a cow farm because I'm shooting video for something, that I want to enjoy that experience. And so I want to carry that through the whole process, whether it's for the client, for me, for the crew that we're working with. Like I want it to be, if I have the capability of setting the tone, that's what I want to focus on. And so I try not to give it extra energy as far as like focusing on, well, what if then that's like adding pressure to yourself. So I think it's the confidence of knowing who you want to be in person and in the personal world and in the professional world. And for me, it's not that different. Like I know there's people that are like very different in their professional world and their personal world. But for me, aside from specific conversations I would never have in a professional world compared to personal world, other than that, like my personality, I'm just always going to be who I am. And I don't overthink it. I don't want to overthink it. I think that's when you get in trouble, is when you try to overthink it or be somebody who you're not. Yeah. That's when things get a little, wonky, I think.
It's exhausting, I would imagine, having so many different personas that from time to time, depending on whom you're in the room with, you got to remember who you were to them last time. I mean, if you've got that many personas, you need to become an actor or an actress or whatever so that you can do that thing, right?
Yeah. And people have different, like I call them avatars, where, it's like they're one person one way. And then maybe down the road when they have kids, they think like, oh, now I need to be this person. I'm a mom now. And then they change their avatar and you're like, whoa, what happened? And I think that is always interesting to see.
Yeah, it's very telling how people come up with these conclusions about everybody else without having any sense of what they have been living with or living through or how they approach life in general. But boy, do they have an opinion. But to your point, let me not get on that soapbox because we'll be going another hour here. Jane, I want to transition now to talk a bit about the business aspects of this, because the creative aspects are very well defined for us here. You are a powerhouse in that regard. And I know you're modest, but I said it, you didn't, so you don't have to worry. But you're a powerhouse when it comes to creativity, but you're also just curious about what goes on. And I think that infuses that creative sensibility that you have. But then comes the aspect of, okay, I'm loving what I do. I do it really, really well. I am courageous. I am confident, and I continue to learn. That's wonderful. But then you say, hey, I'm going to take this, and as opposed to just doing it, for someone else all the time, I'm going to start my own business. Wow. What does that take to get to? Tell me about it.
Okay, so I'm gonna say something here. I'm gonna take us back, and this is something that I don't know if I think you'll remember, but again, it was a conversation that you and I had, and it was after the Grammy party, Charles, and it was the Grammys when Chris Brown beat on Rihanna. Like I remember I was with you at the Grammys. So we did this whole event after Grammys party. And then we hadn't eaten dinner, of course, because you're working, I'm working. And I remember afterwards you were like, have you eaten anything? And I was like, no. And you and Bruce and I, we went to like a Denny's at I don't even know what time. IHOP. Yep, there you go.
I remember it well.
And I remember back then I said to you, and I mentioned it, like all those foundation videos I did, I said to you, like, Charles, like I really love working on projects for you, because I think too, for us to do what we do creatively, it is such a difference when you have people that you're creating for, when they know exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
This is what story we want to tell. This is how we want to tell it.
Yes.
Once we have that direction, then creatively, it's up to us to bring that out. And I remember telling you how much I liked working with you on videos because you knew what you wanted. And then I was like, and then it's just like, I'm surrounded by good people.
Mm.
And you said, well, isn't that the goal?
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, that's what you work for. You work for the fact that you always want all your projects to be where you're working with good people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something where back then I was young in production, so I didn't have those opportunities where I could build it.
Right.
And so for me, of course, over the years, I strived for that. I was like, that's the goal is, production teams, the people I get to work with, the people I get to work for.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just get to the place where I can be picky and I can say no to jobs. And if I don't want to work with them, because I've done that and never again. And then I can hand select people. And of course, for me to make that leap of creating a business, it was because I had an opportunity where a client was like, hey, and I was freelancing and they were like, can you just do this production?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just that moment of this is an opportunity, but I need to create a company so that I can have production insurance.
Right.
And of course, all this stuff wouldn't have gone to where it was for me to even have these opportunities to go for it if I didn't have, the support of my husband, who's just been my ride or die since college from the beginning, and always encouraging me to go for it. And so when I had that opportunity, I jumped, and it was that moment of, okay, now I'm at that place where I get to hand select the people I want to work with, the people that I want to create with. And then how awesome is that now we're really talking about the full experience, not just for me, but the full experience that I want my clients to have. And so I think that that's what was the motivation, was that I worked this hard and I had this opportunity. And while it was a little, it makes you nervous to be like, that's a lot of responsibility, having a business and the level of people that you're hiring and all the paperwork and contracts. And listen, that's like my least favorite part. Anybody in the creative world, that's our least favorite part. However, it's important to build the team that can support you in the parts that you hate, so that you can focus on the parts that you love. And then it's all worth it because of the level that I get to do it at now. And that's something that I do not take lightly.
Yeah. The fact that you admit to that, because I totally get it, paperwork, numbers, all that kind of stuff. You're like, I don't want to deal with that. But yeah, who you surround yourself with makes all the difference. But let's go and look at the fact that even with that strength of conviction as it relates to those that you have supporting you in that regard, the last 2 years have sucked, right? It's been terrifically difficult. A lot of places have not been able to make it through, and yet here we are. HypeGirl Creative still stands. This isn't a definitive question because I know it's not black and white, but how did you continue to stay the course where you not only were interested in pursuing what you do because it's what you love, but also willing to find your way through the morass of all of the issues and business limitations there were because of a full-blown pandemic?
Right. I mean, the pandemic was, honestly, it was one of those things that when COVID happened, it was that thing of like, we're all going through this. And so for me, it wasn't so much where I could just be, when people were like, oh, how you doing? How's everything going? And I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, there's a lot of people that have it worse than I do, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to complain.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just kind of like a waiting game a little bit of
Right.
like seeing where, where this was going to go. And at the time I was working on a documentary, and it was one of those things where we had to stop because we couldn't film.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was super interesting once we started filming in June, late June, where it was kind of like the first time we had to learn about all the COVID-19, the rules and what we needed to do to keep people on set safe, and the responsibility that we all felt to keep everyone safe. And then also cutting our crew size to half to make it so that we could social distance.
Right.
So all of that, I knew going in when COVID happened, and then, I had less client work.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was doing anything.
Right.
I had already signed on to do this documentary, which in the end, it was kind of like, oh, at least I've got something
Mm-hmm.
that I get to, at least create still.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things where I looked at it and I thought, I'm just going to be open at this point to see where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
And what that meant for me was while I was still working as a director producer for select production companies that I like to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I was still doing that. That was about 25%. And then 75% was like full productions coming through HypeGirl Creative.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, after COVID, I just kind of opened it up because it doesn't matter, how, if the full production comes through HypeGirl, or if now I'm working with production companies that I like to work with, if the full production, if they have an opportunity and they want to hire me as a director, I'm still setting the tone of the production and of like how the production, how the crew is, all of that. I'm still a part of that control of my experience. And so I just started opening that up to the fact that, yes, I'm going to take on those bigger projects and direct. And it was ultimately because if I wanted to continue to get my own clients, I still need to continue to create so that I can show the kind of work that I could do. I can't just sit here and wait for work to come in because of how I want it to come in. At the same time, running a business, there's certain things you can compromise, whether, on the ego or no ego. It doesn't always, the full production doesn't need to come through me. I'm still working with people I want to work with, and I'm still creating really great content, whether it's through my production company or somebody else's. But either way, HypeGirl Creative is represented through me. And that's kind of how I've shifted my career and my company. And now I'm starting to find some more opportunities where I'm starting to get new direct to clients because of other doors that me having to pivot a little has opened. And so that's been a really good learning experience. Just in the production industry, there's a lot of ego, and it's very much driven that way. And so when you work with people that aren't ego driven, it is really more collaborative, and people just want to make money doing what they love to do. And I think that that's what I've just fully embraced. I think just as I've gotten older in my career.
I'm going to put that, as we get ready to wrap here, in the category of tough times don't last forever. But, there's this tendency too, Jane, where we're looking at our professional lives in one capacity as if it's somehow separate from the personal life. But when you invest so much of who you are in a business, it's kind of equivalent. So my final question to you is, as we look ahead for Jane Davis, HypeGirl Creative, what is it that you've taken from the experience of these last 2 years, beyond all of that wonderful information you just shared that is about resilience, that taps into the idea that adaptability is the thing, no matter whether it's professionally or in life. But, we see people who see things happen and they act as if, because it may be the worst thing to happen to them at that moment, that they can't survive, that they won't make it through. You and, obviously millions of other people did, millions of other people did not. And for those of us who are here to go on professionally and personally, what is it that you have taken from this that is now something that you will deploy every moment in the future, whenever you think you're about to get in some tough shit and don't know how it's going to work out, that you will remember from this time that you'll use?
I think it's just not taking for granted of anything. And I think that, for a while there, when COVID first hit, we were all kind of like, what is going to happen? And then there were people that were like, it's not a big deal. And, the way everything is going, where there's things that, just make total sense, but yet to some people, it's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what that has shown me, where I personally and professionally, I don't take anything for granted.
Right.
And it is truly just like really being invested and being a part of something that might not ever happen again, and not taking for granted those moments. And so I take that with, if I'm on a shoot, whether it's a big budget project or a small budget project, it's just something like, this is where I'm at, where I am right now. And I might not ever get to come back here. And so I'm just going to enjoy it right now and think of it where this is part of me creating a memory. And I think that what COVID showed us is that not everything is permanent, and that things can happen that just completely flips our world around, where now we're walking around with masks all the time. I mean, who would have ever thought that? So I think it's just that whole thing of really, showing me what's important, and just enjoying all those moments personally and professionally, and creating memories. And that to me has become so important over the years. And then I think it just completely escalated with COVID. And so even in the professional world, I did a couple passion projects like years ago, and then it just kind of got to be like work. And I think that, I'm at a space now where that's something I want to incorporate back. Right. So I've, got like 2 projects I'm thinking about for 2022, where those are going to be passion projects. But that's been part of what COVID has given me, was I've seen other people's resilience, and I've learned from other people's survival of what they've done. And I'm kind of like, what, I want to just kind of take a moment and do some special things because of what I've learned through the past couple of years. Yeah. And some of that is my resilience, but some of that is highlighting other people's resilience. Right. And ultimately just continue to tell really good stories and make really good content that other people want to watch and other people think is as compelling as I do.
Spoken like a true story. You brought it back to the storytelling, and I love that, because that is the nature of it indeed. Jane, we're going to wrap up now, but before we do, for those people who want to access the wonderful, talented, instinctual abilities of HypeGirl Creative, tell people how they can find you.
You can go to hypegirlcreative.com. You can see some of the work there. I'm on Instagram. I'm not that great about social media posts, but I'll create it all day long. But when it comes to mine, I'm like not that great. But it's just HypeGirl Creative on Instagram. And then you can find me on LinkedIn at, Jane Davis. And if you search Jane Davis at HypeGirl Creative. And I just want to say, Charles, like, this has been really cool to do this with you. At first I was like, I don't know what I'm going to, talk about with Charles. And then I've thought about like all those times we've closed down restaurants talking. So I knew that it wasn't going to be hard to talk to you. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. And just also, how fun is it that talking through this, how much influence you've had in my life? That's been something that I've never forgotten. And I wanted to tell you just a quick story real quick. Last night, my husband and I were at dinner and they were playing good music and they played a CeeLo song. And he goes, "Oh, I love CeeLo." And I go, "Me too. I'm going to be on his podcast tomorrow."
Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
So I had to tell you that story.
Oh wow!
And I love that story about you at the airport security when somebody thought you were CeeLo.
Hey,
I love
CeeLo,
that story.
I see you, CeeLo. No, you don't.
But really, I do think that for all the people that listen to PooleProof Wisdom, for all the people that you've interviewed, I truly do mean it when I say you, my friend, are the ultimate hype man.
Oh, well.
And I love that about you. And you're always so encouraging. You always, have the best advice. And that's one of the things that, that's why I consider you a dear friend and a dear mentor. And I've held on to that. When you left AB, I was like, hey, you and I, we're gonna stay in touch.
Well, I am thoroughly blushing now, and I'm holding up evidence for Gio to see so he can see my palms, given that that's the only place that I can blush. So I am so thankful, and certainly everything that you said, I certainly echo that. I think that, we all remain in people's lives for a reason. Some people only for a short time. Those are the seasonal ones. But when people really connect at the heart and at the spirit, anything is possible. And you can go years without seeing each other or speaking to each other. But every time you really do reconnect, it's literally picking up exactly where you left off. And that's the nature of what we have here. And I am so proud of what you've created. And I still think, when I use the term wildly creative, you're the first person who comes to mind, because very few people can take all of the stuff that's in my head that I jumble out when I'm communicating it and literally manifest it without me having to have my hands on it myself. But you are capable of doing that. So thank you for your creativity, for your leadership, and for your humanity, because first and foremost, that is what drives everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Charles. And it was great to talk to you and catch up. It's just like old times, like you said.
And folks, look her up. I'm telling you, she called me a hype guy, but literally, she will turn your stuff out when it comes to any type of idea that you have. So thank you again, Jane.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PooleProof Wisdom Podcast. We always enjoy the company. Be sure to listen, like, subscribe, and share using Google and Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, Anchor, Overcast, YouTube, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this episode, we'd appreciate it very much if you simply tell a friend about the podcast too. Spread the word. Until next time, keep on living.